Hello and welcome to this IC engine and gas turbine classes. In this particular video lectures, we will be demonstrating a 4-stroke SI engine, the cut section model of a 4-stroke SI engine. We have already discussed the schematic diagram of 4-stroke engines, and through this video you will be generally able to understand the working principle of a 4-stroke engine. Okay, now let me first introduce the different components of a 4-stroke engine. Now you can see from this cut section model, this is a model for dedicated to the SI engine, that is the spark ignition engine, the engine in which generally carburetor is used to mix the air and fuel. Now you can see this is the intake manifold. You can see this manifold. This is the intake manifold, which is generally connects the engine cylinder. This is the engine cylinder with the carburetor. This whole arrangement is called the carburetor. The purpose of the carburetor, what? The carburetor generally provides the homogeneous air fuel mixture. Okay, and this air fuel mixture generally is entering through this intake manifold to the engine cylinder, and at the end of the intake manifold, you can see this is the intake valve. Okay, this is the suction valve or the intake valve, and through this suction valve or intake valve we can control the entry of the air fuel mixture to the engine cylinder. Okay, next you can see this is the exhaust manifold from where the combustion product or the combustion product after the burning process that are generally driven out to the atmosphere. This is the exhaust manifold, and this exhaust manifold is controlled by a valve which is generally called exhaust valve. And now this is the engine cylinder. As we have already discussed in our classes, also in the schematic diagram here I have also shown you the engine cylinder. This is the engine cylinder through which in which the combustion of the air fuel mixture takes place, and this is the piston. You can see this is the piston, and this piston generally rotates generally reciprocates inside this cylinder. Okay, the piston is reciprocates inside the cylinder. This is the piston, and the piston is connected with the crankshaft through a connecting rod. This is called the connecting rod. This black link mechanism is generally, this black rod is generally called the connecting rod, which generally connects this piston with the crankshaft. Okay, and what is the purpose of this connecting rod? We have already discussed several times. That is the purpose of the connecting rod. Of this connecting rod is to convert the reciprocating movement. You can see this is the reciprocating movement or the up down movement of the piston inside the engine cylinder, and this up down movement is generally converted into the rotational movement of the crankshaft, and that is done by this connecting rod. This is the connecting rod which generally connects piston with the crankshaft, and this is the crankshaft. Now you can see this is the crankshaft. The due to the reciprocating movement of the piston, the crankshaft is rotating. Okay, this is the crankshaft, and this is how the reciprocating movement of the piston is generally converted into the rotational movement of the crankshaft. This is the crankshaft, and at one side of the crankshaft, which I am generally using to rotate this crankshaft or reciprocate this piston, this whole circular thing is generally called the flywheel. What is the purpose of flywheel? This red circular generally disc is generally called the flywheel, and this flywheel generally used to store the excess power during the power stroke, and that is generally supplied to the power consuming strokes like suction, compression and the exhaust. Okay, and another end of the crankshaft is generally connected with the engine shaft or the gear mechanism. Okay, you can see this is the gear mechanism. If we rotate the flywheel, then we can see the crankshaft is rotating. At one side of the crankshaft there is a flywheel, and another side of the crankshaft that is connected with the gear mechanism. Okay, you can see the gear transformation from a small gear, it is converted into a small gear is generally connected with the big gear. Okay, and thus this the reduction of the speed is generally happening. Okay, and this whole arrangement is generally dedicated for the 4-stroke SI engine, spark ignition engine, in which petrol is used as the fuel. Okay, and this air fuel mixture is supplied by this carburetor. This whole arrangement is the carburetor. Okay, now I want to show you the valve mechanism, the mechanism by which the valve is generally controlled. You can see this is the rocker arm mechanism. The rocker arm mechanism, this is the rocker arm, and through which the valve is operating, the exhaust valve and the intake valve or the suction valve. And this is the spark plug, which is generally used to ignite the air fuel mixture inside the engine cylinder. Now we will be generally discussing the 4 strokes that are generally taking place inside the engine through this cut section model. Now we have already discussed in our classes, that is, there are 2 restricted areas in the piston, in the cylinder, engine cylinder, and the restricted areas are top dead center and the bottom dead center. Okay, this is the engine cylinder. You can see if I rotate the flywheel, the piston will now moves from bottom to up, and top dead center, this is the top dead center. At this point or beyond this point, piston cannot move, okay, further, cannot move further. Okay, so we can say top dead center is a uppermost point beyond which piston cannot move. This is the top dead center. Okay, and this from this top dead center to cylinder head, this is the cylinder head. Okay, this is the cylinder head, and top of the cylinder at the position when the piston is at the top dead center, at that time the top of the cylinder, from the top of the cylinder and the cylinder head, the distance between the cylinder head or the volume between the cylinder head, that is called the clearance volume. This is the clearance volume. This volume is generally called the clearance volume, and during the compression process we will be generally discussing that the burning process is generally taking place inside the clearance volume. And when the piston moves at towards the bottom, then we will found another restricted area, that is generally called bottom dead center. Okay, and from this is the bottommost position from which piston cannot move further beyond this point. Piston cannot move further down. Okay, and that's why this point is called the bottom dead center. And the movement of the piston from bottom dead center to top dead center, and also top dead center to bottom dead center, this distance or this movement is called the stroke of a piston. Okay, so how we can define the stroke? The stroke is the length between the top dead center and the bottom dead center. Okay, and to accomplish this stroke, one stroke, that means the one movement of the piston from bottom dead center to top dead center, or top dead center to bottom dead center, the requirement of the crank revolution is generally half. Okay, the one stroke is generally completed for the half revolution of the crankshaft. Okay, now if we want to explain the 4 stroke or the 4 processes, that is intake process or the compression process or the expansion process from this cut section model, then it will be very much clear to you how the engine generally operates in 4-stroke spark ignition engine. Okay, now in case of suction stroke, we know the piston moves from top dead center, piston is at the top dead center and it is moving towards the bottom dead center, and at this time the suction valve, you can see this is the suction valve, and this suction valve is generally open at this time. the suction valve is open, but the exhaust valve, that is generally closed at this time, and due to the pressure difference, here is the suction pressure due to the downwards movement of the piston, and the carburetor is at the atmospheric pressure, so there is a pressure difference, and due to this pressure difference, the air fuel mixture, the homogeneous air fuel mixture is generally entering into the cylinder. And this process, when the piston moves from top dead center to the bottom dead center and the intake valve is open, this process is generally called the intake stroke. Why it is a stroke? Because the piston is moving from top dead center to bottom dead center, and we already know the distance between the top dead center and the bottom dead center is generally called stroke. And after this intake process, the inlet valve, that is generally closed, and now at piston is at the bottom dead center, and piston now will generally move from the bottom dead center to top dead center to accomplish the compression process. Now you can see this is the after the suction process, and through the suction inside the cylinder there is a full of air fuel mixture, fresh air fuel mixture or the homogeneous air fuel mixture inside the cylinder now, and this homogeneous air fuel mixture is compressed by the piston by moving bottom dead center to top dead center, and in this position you can see the both valve, the intake valve and the exhaust valve, both valves are closed in this situation, and this whole volume is generally, you can see, compressed into the clearance volume. Okay, that means the piston is at now the is at the top dead center, and this is the process is called the compression process. And this process, in this process, piston is moving from bottom dead center to top dead center, and whole air fuel mixture is compressed into a clearance volume. And at the we already know that in the compression process, first process is the compression process, and at the end of the compression process there is the burning process. And for this burning process, in case of SI engine or spark ignition engine or the petrol engine, a spark plug is used. I have already shown you the spark plug. This is the spark plug, and this spark plug is used to initiate the burning process. Okay, now inside the clearance volume, we have the high pressure and temperature air fuel mixture, and spark plug is generally used to ignite this air fuel mixture, high pressure and temperature air fuel mixture. Then through this burning process, an axial thrust will be generated. Okay, and that axial thrust will generally force the piston to go down. Okay, তো এখানে যে বার্নিং প্রসেসটা হবে, সেই বার্নিং প্রসেসের ফলে যে অ্যাক্সিয়াল থার্স্টটা জেনারেট হবে, সেই অ্যাক্সিয়াল থার্স্টটা কি হবে, এই পিস্টনটাকে কি করবে, পিস্টনটাকে নিচের দিকে মুভ করতে বাধ্য করবে। ওকে, এন্ড দ্যাট প্রসেস ইজ কল্ড জেনারেলি expansion process or the power stroke, because from this process we are generally getting the power, that is the axial force or axial thrust we are generally getting from this stroke. Okay, now from this expansion stroke, what will happen, the piston will move from top dead center to bottom dead center, and due to this movement of this piston, okay, the power will be generally delivered to the crankshaft. The rotational, the reciprocating movement is generally converted to the rotational movement of the crankshaft, and the excessive power generally stored within the flywheel. Okay, and then the exhaust process. Now the cylinder is generally filled up with the exhaust gas or combustion product, and this combustion product will have to driven out from the will have to drive out from the engine cylinder. That's why the exhaust process and piston will move from this bottom dead center to top dead center, and in this case the exhaust valve is open. In this case you can see the exhaust valve is open, and the burning gases or the combustion gases will be driven out through this exhaust port, and this is how the engine is generally operating. These four processes are generally repeating step by step, and the engine is generally working. Okay, now we will focus how this the reciprocating movement is generally converted into the rotational movement of the crankshaft. Now you can see this is the for the each stroke there is a transformation of reciprocating movement into the rotational movement of the crankshaft. Okay, or the rotational movement into the reciprocating movement. When the reciprocating movement is converting into the rotational movement at the time of the power stroke, and at the time of the power stroke the excessive power is stored by the flywheel, and that power is generally used to drive the non power consuming or the power consuming strokes. Okay, non producing power. Okay, the process which are not producing power, in that case generally this excessive power, this stored power is generally used. Okay, now you can see if we observe closely observe, then we will find the rotational movement for the two rotational movement. Okay, the two rotational movement or the two revolution of the crankshaft, there is a one power stroke in case of 4-stroke engine. Okay, now this is the suction stroke, this is the suction stroke, this is the compression stroke, this is the expansion stroke, and this is the exhaust stroke. And for this there are two revolution of the crankshaft. Okay, when we get the power from the power stroke, the crankshaft is rotating, and due to which the gear that is generally connected with the crankshaft, that is also rotating, and this gear mechanism is connected with the some other mechanism with the wheels, and thus the total vehicle or the bike or the cars are generally moving. And this is the main principle of a 4-stroke petrol engine.